where would you like to begin the timeline when it comes to South Indian history? That's a question to you first. And then tell us the story from that beginning point.
Oh, that's quite a lot. I'll give it a shot. Yes, so this is very long history, what we call as long durée history or big history. So if you ask me where does South Indian history start, I would have to say all the way back to Gondwana land, when it was a separate plate, and then
Wow.
it crashed into Pangaea, making the Himalayas. So it starts there. But if you're actually looking for history, then it would start with the megalithic period. And then, so think of megalithic period as a starting point. But even before that, probably there was human habitation, because we find this one of evidence here and there. For instance, one of the big finds that we have is a hand axe, which is called as a Acheulean hand axe. I mean, it's a typology that we use. It's similar to what has been discovered in France. So it might show that you have migratory patterns, or it might not just be people who migrated. It might be technology which migrated. It might be ideas which migrated. So we do have evidence of that from the megalithic period. Then the evidence that we have is of Sangam. So different historians have given different periodizations for it. Some have stretched it back to 800 BCE, 8th century BCE. Some have put it as like 500 BCE to 500 CE, so 5th century BCE to 5th century CE, which is a safe timeline.
What is the first thing that happens? Like, is it a kingdom that's mentioned?
It's not a kingdom at all. You see a set of tribes.
Okay.
You remember the Chachala
Yeah.
episode that I mentioned? So that's why I said it's an anachronistic example. In the movie, it's a kingdom and you have different tribes in the kingdom. Here we have to imagine a situation where you don't have kings, you only have chiefs, tribal chiefs.
Gotcha.
And these chiefs were called as the Movendar. The term that was used for them is Kilavar. Now Kilavar is a reference to someone who's elderly, an elderly male. So even today in Malayalam, the word Kiravan refers to, though slightly disrespectfully, refers to someone who is old and senile.
Okay.
But in the Sangam, that's why I said words change their meaning over time.
Like how in Hindi you have Buddha.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
So you have Kilavar, and Kilavar referred to people who took decisions, and it was probably the patriarch of the family, that is the eldest male of the family, who might have been taking the decisions, calling the shots. So that is probably why the term Kilavar was also used as a word for ruler. And you have references to different kinds of social groups. Now, B.R. Ambedkar, he has made a very interesting insight into Tamil history. He has argued that these were exogamous groups. Now, what is exogamy? Marrying outside the group. So, and that's where the Ahandanuru poetry becomes important, because much later in India, what we see is that we have a culture of marrying within the group. Whether it is religion or caste or region or language, for instance, we tend to do that. But you have to think of a situation about 2,500 years ago to 2,000 years ago, when people were not marrying within the group. They were exogamous. They would marry outside the group. So you would see very interesting combinations, like a coastal woman marrying a peasant from the agrarian tract, or a peasant woman or a water girl from the agrarian tract marrying or entering into a relationship. So I'm using terms like marrying so that we understand it today. Their notions of marriage would be very, very different.
Like what?
Okay, slightly controversial area, but historically there's a lot of proof for this. So human beings at that point of time, across the world, and even if you look at ancient civilizations, we have very little reference to monogamy. So
polygamy.
Yeah, you see a lot of polygamy. You see a lot of all. So we kind of call them situationships now. They already had that back then.
Wow.
So for instance, you would see, so Natrinai from the Sangam literature, it's a set of poems. So Natrinai refers to this woman who's traveling to a region where salt is being made. So she's, we do not know where she is from, but she's traveling all the way to, I think, maybe get salt. And in that new area, so she sees this group called Umannar. Umannar were salt makers. And she stands in front of a courtyard and sees two children play. And she realizes that one of the children, he looks exactly like her partner or her husband. And what is the usual emotion that we will attach to this woman? Possessiveness or maybe anger of being cheated upon. But this woman in the Natrinai, she doesn't feel angry. She feels warmth and affection for the child. She's like, this child is just like my child because he looks exactly like my partner. And the partner has passed away because there's a reference that he has become a hero stone. Now, hero stones were the small sepulchral monuments. Are like, you have headstones now for graves. So these were stones which is similar to the headstones. Again, anachronism, but just so that you understand. And these were erected for heroes. So people who would go fight in the war and become a martyr in the war, or people who would die protecting the village from some kind of calamity or a wild animal. So you would have hero stones being erected for them. So there's a reference that her husband had, or her partner had already become a hero stone, meaning that he had already died. So in this child, she sees the reflection of her husband and she feels that this is a very radiant child. And the rest of the poem is about she describing her love and affection for the child. So you had very different notions of marriage, very different notions of love back then. You also had other kinds of situations where, children that we refer to as illicit children. You had no illicit children back then because all children were considered to be part of the community because you did not have the notion of a monogamous marriage.
There was no marriage ritual then?
No, there were marriage rituals. There are references to certain kinds of marriage. But if you had other relations which were beyond the purview of marriage, they were not disdained or frowned upon.
For both men and women.
Yes, that is what is truly interesting there for both men and women. But it also depends on which part of the Sangam you're looking at. As we move towards the late Sangam, as we move towards Shilapatikaram, the trope of the chaste wife had already emerged.
If you enjoyed today's clip, make sure you check out all the other clips we've uploaded on this channel. You'll find a clip related to almost every single topic as long as you're willing to search for it.